and also what you hope to learn from tonight's webinar. Just a note about what the Episcopal Church Foundation is. We are an independent, entirely lay-led foundation, which, as you can see from the photo, we have a serious mission, but we also have a serious sense of fun. Our mission is to build the leadership and financial capability of Episcopal congregations, dioceses, and other institutions in the Episcopal Church, and we do this in a variety of ways. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to explore ECF Vital Practices, www.ecfvp.org, which is an online resource site created for you, the congregational leaders of the Episcopal Church. We also provide a variety of financial services, including helping congregations do capital campaigns, start plan giving programs, and more. But one of the most important things that we do is what we're doing right now, which is we provide educational events, workshops, and webinars on a wide variety of topics, including becoming local. With that, I want to introduce you to Will Scott. Will is a recipient of one of the recipients of the 2012 ECF Fellowship, in part for his work, for his passion for helping Episcopal congregations become truly and deeply local. He is the vicar of St. Cyprian's Episcopal Church in San Francisco, which is deeply committed to meeting the needs of its diverse urban neighborhood. At St. Cyprian's, Will has helped facilitate a variety of partnerships with local businesses, neighborhoods, associations, a Lutheran congregation, and after-school and summer programs serving at-risk youth. And with that, I'm going to ask that everyone who has their webcam on right now, if you could turn it off so that we can see Will in the box. I'm going to be doing that as well.
Hi, everyone. So welcome back to Becoming Local. If this is your first time, welcome for the first time. I want to begin with a little bit of a perhaps challenging conversation about our logo, our symbol, which was designed by someone named William Baldwin, a member of the Cathedral of the Incarnation on Long Island. And the flag and seal of the Episcopal Church were adopted in 1940 at the General Convention held in Kansas City. And here's a story I read online by Louise M. Belletto of the Diocese of Long Island, I believe. The history of the church flag, however, goes back to 1918, when the Diocese of Long Island celebrated its 50th anniversary. Bishop Frederick Burgess, second Bishop of Long Island, appointed a committee to make plans for observing the anniversary of and selected William Baldwin, a member of the Cathedral chapter, to head the committee. Among Mr. Baldwin's plans was a great procession through the grounds of the cathedral to precede the anniversary service. To heighten its color, he arranged the heraldic experts to design banners to be carried in the procession. There was a diocesan banner, 3 of the deaconeries, Brooklyn, Queens, Suffolk, 20 for the diocesan societies, and 1 for each parish and mission, a total of some 170 banners in all. The flags were made the procession of a fine and picturesque sight, but the absence of a flag representing the Episcopal Church saddened Mr. Baldwin. Others agreed, and the next Long Island Diocesan Convention petitioned General Convention, which responded by establishing a commission and appointing Mr. Baldwin as its secretary. Story has it that when Mr. Baldwin presented his model of the flag to the General Convention, to his great disappointment, it proved to be too small, and he was asked to present a full-size replica. So he went shopping in Kansas City and purchased some turkey red cotton, some pale material, a child's crib sheet, scissors and thimble, needles and thread, and in his hotel room that night, he and the Reverend Hubert S. Wood, later Dean of the Cathedral, worked diligently. The following day, Mr. Baldwin triumphantly displayed the full-size facsimile of the flag to the General Convention. Mr. Baldwin described the flag's design and symbolism in his own words. The red cross is the oldest Christian symbol dating back to the 3rd century. The white represents purity and the red blood of the martyrs. The blue is ecclesiastical blue, light in color and used in the clothing of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And on this flag represents the human nature of our Lord, which he got from his Virgin Mother. The 9 crosslets, or Jerusalem crosses, represent the 9 dioceses that convened in Philadelphia in 1789, when the Constitution of the Protestant Episcopal Church was adopted, with its House of Bishops and House of Clerical and Lay Deputies and the Book of Common Prayer. The 9 cross croziers are set in the form of a St. Andrew's cross in memory of the fact that to avoid swearing allegiance to the British Crown, Bishop-elect Samuel Seabury of Connecticut had to go to Scotland to be consecrated by Scottish bishops. History is very important, helping us understand who we are and where we come from. But there are times when our attachment to the past inhibits our being fully present to our contemporary context and able to imagine a different future. Logos, flags, shields have many different purposes, and my hunch is that the Episcopal shield inspires among many confirmed baptized communicants a great deal of pride and loyalty. What, however, does the symbol say to outsiders? Many churches believe that the way to be welcoming in their local context is to make sure that there are lots and lots of signs with this shield on it pointing people to the building, as though there is this large mass of people out there looking for a specifically Episcopal church. And if they could only find it, they would join us right away. We are to assume that people know what this logo means, or that they've heard of the Episcopal Church. Does the shield suggest that we are a people who care more about our past than our future? Are we a private society that wishes to keep our identity mysterious to those unfamiliar with our history? Does it trouble us that the flag and shield were designed and adopted by a general convention solely of men? I'm sure that Mr. Baldwin and the Dean of the Cathedral of the Incarnation were wonderful people. But was there really a committee that worked on this? Or was it put together in a hurry in a hotel room in Kansas City? I've been to general conventions. I kind of know how some of that works. Would we even choose a shield as our logo today? What, after all, is the shield intending to protect us from? Would another image be more suitable and communicate more authentically the church we are, the church we believe the Spirit is calling us to become? When I look at the shield, I think often of battle lines and self-protection, our awkwardness as a body in communicating with many 21st century people. I think of our fear of being vulnerable, especially to those who might have the capacity to inspire change within us. I also imagine what might the church have used to identify us in the past, before there was a flag and shield, and what might we use in the future if this logo does not continue to serve us. It's interesting, I think, that not long ago when we were offered newly designed signage, the shield is tilted sideways. Perhaps this means we are becoming more open and less protective. So let's transition now to the lyrics at the bottom of the slide. These are from a country song. Perhaps my friend in Abilene, Texas would recognize it. I'm betraying that I'm from Virginia and I like country songs a little bit. Another one that might be appropriate for our discussion would be More Love. In fact, the church here in San Francisco made a bunch of buttons with More Love on it. But can you imagine the Episcopal Church singing this song, your church singing this song? And I don't mean singing it in church on a Sunday. I mean more symbolically. Can you imagine our beloved church saying to us, she needs wide open spaces, room to make mistakes. She needs new faces, and she's aware of the highest stakes. The song is about a teenage girl leaving home to discover who she is, saying goodbye to her family, a natural part of life for all of us. I wonder if the Episcopal Church, too, isn't similarly in a period of transition, a time in which we need to lovingly differentiate ourselves from our parents, not abandon them, but shift our emphasis from what we've known and felt safe and secure around to what is new and foreign, what is yearning to come alive within us. Obviously, our church's parents are going to have some issues with this transition. They are going to be upset, heartbroken, and will struggle to get used to the new haircut and funny clothes. They'll have to trust that they raised their daughter well and that she has what she needs to make good decisions. They will pray for her as she seeks to make new friends and develop her own family. They will wrestle with her new identity and their new identity as empty nesters, and they themselves have an opportunity to try some new things. So we haven't begun with a prayer yet, so let's do that. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Last week I spoke to you about a few contexts where connectivity between congregations and neighborhood communities seemed to be missing, where congregations were cut off from their local context. We discussed a number of possibilities for bridging the gap. Encouraging lay leaders and clergy to spend time getting to know neighbors, especially in the midst of change and challenges. Develop relationships with nearby schools and universities. Consider the age and demographics of those around your church, as well as those in front of you on Sunday. Do a neighborhood exegetical walk with a team from your church. Engage in conversation with your neighbors. What's it like living or working in this neighborhood? After last week's conversation, I spoke with a few participants, and one of the things that I believe got left out was why. Why do this? One participant sensed that I was presenting an attractional model for the church, for church growth, rather than a missional approach, meaning I was striving to attract folks to join the church rather than encouraging folks in the church to go out and be in mission with our neighbors. And I want to be very clear that I believe both are very important practices. Our churches do need to do a better job inviting people into our communities. I think of this as much like Elizabeth O'Connor's famous description of the Christian life, that we are on inward and outward journeys. Our congregations need to be on an outward and inward journey. We need to make room for newcomers, strangers to enter, to be welcomed, to have a voice and role in our lives. We also need to be on outward journeys in which we engage the world around us and seek collaboration with other faith groups and organizations. We need to not just expect folks to join us, but we need to join them. Being relational, being in relationship with our neighbors, though, is not simply so that they may help us or we help them, but so that together we may experience life abundant and so that we may fulfill our mission. So here's the big why. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And then from the Book of Common Prayer, to restore all people to unity with God and each other in Christ. And what is this not about? This is not about folks joining our church and becoming pledging members or getting our average Sunday attendance numbers going up. This is about experiencing vitality and restoring unity, which may not just be a Sunday morning activity or something that happens between the four walls of our church building. However, St. Cyprian's, my congregation, by engaging our neighbors, a fruit of that work, not the reason for it, has been an increase in Sunday attendance and an increase in our pledging unit. Now, on the next slide, I want to show you something that was very helpful to our congregation and our neighborhood as we thought about the challenges and opportunities we face. This may be familiar to many people. In the circle on your left, you have represented an historic and changing congregation. Ours will turn 90 years old in April. That may not seem very old to folks on the East Coast, but to us here on the West Coast, it's getting up there. To the right, you have a large, flexible building. Ours, 3 years ago, had a good bit of deferred maintenance and was underutilized by both the congregation and by the neighborhood. Below that, you have our diverse, engaged, and friendly neighborhood. You'll notice that each of these circles is distinct from the other. There's a gap. They are not overlapping or even touching. And the next slide, which is actually about 6 months old now, I think, shows a congregation starting to take responsibility of its physical plant, using it more and in new ways, and caring for it more. And you have a neighborhood that is starting to do the same thing. And the congregation and the neighborhood are starting to connect, at least on the surface. I went too far. Whoops. There we go. Where's the other slide? Oh, no. You took it out, Brendan. It's okay. Sorry. I should have caught that. In one of my slides earlier, they actually are not all hunky-dory, but we're working on that. I have to find my place now. So we're now at this layer where all three are overlapping and interacting, connected with the neighborhood is connected with the space, the congregation is connected with both. Now the neighborhood is not monolithic. It's eclectic and diverse in many ways. This next slide shows that. You have various demographics, age groups, cultures with whom St. Cyprian's is beginning to get acquainted. If you notice in this diagram, we have churches off to the side. They aren't perceived by many as being connected to these other entities, these other groups. In our case, most of the churches in our neighborhood are there for an aging population that drive in a few times a month for services. And then the rest of the time are locked up and cut off from the life of the urban neighborhood. In fact, when our congregation members visited the neighborhood association and introduced ourselves, we were told that this had never happened before and that the neighborhood association had been in existence for over 15 years. Not one church had showed up. Since that time, members and leaders of the association have joined the church and have helped us lead to a deepening connectivity that we've wanted. Consider your own church's neighborhood. Where is your church amidst the landscape? Are you off to the side, or are you perceived as a vital and integrated part of what's happening around you? Is that universally felt, or only by particular demographics, age groups, or cultures? Not long ago, a friend of mine was talking with a church that is directly across the street from a large university, and he asked them about their college ministry. And the church person said, "We're just getting started." And my friend said back, "You've been across the street from that university for 150 years. How is it possible that you're just getting started?" Those of you who are familiar with the English style of parish churches, in which churches are set up with the whole area in mind, not just those who show up for worship, that's the model we've been inspired by at St. Cyprian. And if you read the article that Jim shared with us, those paradigm shifts, you'll notice that this is something other congregations from different denominations are also grabbing hold of. Now, I thought we'd go ahead and have a little conversation here and talk about where you are in relationship to your neighborhood? Where do you see your church in relationship to the housing, to the schools, to various interest groups? And I think the way we're going to do that is have some hands. You can show your hand, and we'll work it out for you to speak.
Okay. So this is Miguel, and I just posted some discussion notes, and there are several different ways that we can comment on this topic. You can either type your question or comment into the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and we will try to enable your microphone. And if that doesn't work, we can, if you share your phone number in the chat box, we'll just call you and do that. So let's see. So, Will, I wonder, for me at least, it wasn't entirely clear your question. So
Okay.
Just repeat that again.
Sure. So I'm wondering if looking at your neighborhood, where on the map, if you will, in terms of constellations, where there's these different groups. There's housing, there's universities, there's interest groups, there's schools, there's the supervisor's office or the city council or the local union or the various groups, the Kiwanis Club, the Key Club, I don't know, various groups. The Daughters of the American Revolution, I don't know. They're in various places. But where you're located, I wonder if you could talk about whether your church is connected to those groups, or is it perceived as being sort of off and cut into off to the edge? I can say that in our context, most churches are not sort of hubs where people gather from these different groups. Mostly they're off to the side. And I'm wondering for others if that's the case. I think we're probably dealing with very different contexts, but I'd like to hear if what I've said about my neighborhood is any different than it is similar to other people's circumstances.
Great, thank you. So if you would like to comment, we have a few people chatting.
Cool. So Mary's telling us about schools that she's connected with.
You can raise your hand on the top bar of the page. There is a raise your hand figure as well.
Miguel, is there a way to make the chat box bigger so we can see all of what Patricia's saying?
Yes. Let me move this, and I will move here and push this up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So Patricia's telling us, I am sure everyone's reading it, but that she's in a congregation where the congregation and the rector left the church. And now there's a building that's left behind that's in bad shape, and the neighborhood around them is 85% Hispanic and Latino, and they're hoping that they'll be able to meet the needs of that neighborhood, although they may have to move. Okay. And Simon's telling us that he's got a context where homeless ministry is important, but it's created some concerns or tensions in the community around homelessness and poverty. And Susan's sharing examples of people coming in for food and clothing and housing. Located in a student ghetto, Richard is, they say they have some connections to the university. And Susan's saying various groups use the space and they serve a dinner on Tuesdays in a thrift shop. And they're physically in the town itself. Great. And Mary sharing other examples. And Sandra sharing that she lives in a gated retirement community.
Well, Patricia also has a question. She asked, what process did you use to gather the information? You mentioned the neighborhood council, and she saw the neighborhood walk, and what was that?
Yeah, I think we had a number of avenues to which, one of the most important factors in the work that we did at St. Cyprian's was we had a mandate, really, or at least we were inspired from the diocese. I came to St. Cyprian's, if you will, with the purposes of helping the congregation reach the local neighborhood. And so it was a priority that I and the congregation as well work together to know where we were, to get to know our neighbors. So I think sometimes in a lot of cases, it's not something that is being told we should be doing. In this case, it was a priority. We engaged with some community organizations that we had affiliations with in a little limited way. Like a few years ago, the church had helped with some planting of trees in the neighborhood with a group in the neighborhood. There are neighborhood newsletters. The neighborhood association has newsletters that they leave in coffee shops. I am a big fan of clergy spending time in a local pub or local coffee shop or shopping and being local. In our urban environment, that's where you meet people and engage people. And there's lots of communication going on the bulletin boards in various coffee shops and things like that. I'm sure in most college towns there's similar, there's probably a plethora of groups for whom the church can engage. But I think that many times it's not something, there's not a culture that encourages connectivity. There's a culture that sort of has, well, the congregation shows up on Sunday, they all know what it means to be Episcopalian, they all know what it is that the priest should do and what the laity should do, and it's sort of like, well, we all come and do our thing and then we leave in many cases. I think in cases where you have a more enclosed environment or a suburban environment where there's greater distance, it's sometimes a little harder to reach out, but I think they're making it a priority is the first step, and saying, find out who in your congregation actually lives near you. Maybe there's one or two. Or maybe there was a time when the church was very engaged with its local neighborhood, and through the archives you can find examples, and maybe you can start to see if, well, this group was prominent, maybe I can go find that group again. Or what's, even introducing yourself to your local politicians. Who's responsible in terms of what happens politically in your neighborhood? Who's on the school board? Those kinds of basic things are pretty important and can help you have a relationship with them for later down the road. When there's something substantial going on and you need to have that connectivity.
Great. So there are some really wonderful comments in the chat. One person's comment, Thomas Jones, this is a little further up. I'm wondering if we can try to unmute Thomas and see and hear from him. Thomas, theoretically, at least your phone should be working, so you could say something.
It's working. The phone's up.
Great, wonderful. I'm sorry to call on you kind of on the, randomly, but I was very intrigued by what you wrote. I wonder if you could describe the process of going from being an inward, kind of an insular-looking parish to being more out, externally looking?
Well, the previous rector had some serious health issues towards the end of his tenure there, and what everybody kind of began to just focus on a survival mode based on that alone. And over the last couple of years, we have begun doing some of the things you've talked about, and we're really trying to push ourselves to look outside, because if all we do is look inward, we recognize that not only will we not grow numerically, but we don't grow spiritually. And so we have been working very hard this last year with some rather good success in growing spiritually in our efforts. And as you said, the reward is that you grow numerically it just happens without trying.
Richard, could you repeat the last thing you said? I couldn't quite understand what you were saying.
Well, basically what we did was we quit looking at what we do inside the four walls of the church, because that's where their mind has been for a couple of years. We began a mobile food pantry out of our parish hall. We have engaged several local groups to use our space. We have Scouts and Cub Scouts that use our building. We're really trying to get out there to be a presence. We actually have one of the City of Bellevue's committees meets at our church once a month, and it's some of the folks there are from the council, city council. So we've really begun to find a way to open our doors so that we invite people in without the pressure of trying to become members or trying to invite them to be part of us. And we have found that, as you mentioned earlier, that the reaping of the fruits is that we grew, not because of people we invited, but just because people saw what was happening and were interested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's genuine a sense of affection and trust that I think, by being present and being available and really low pressure in terms of people's sense of having to do anything for the church itself, I think is important, at least initially. I mean, we've had challenges where we've had the building overrun now with lots of activity, and the church ends up having to take care of the facility in ways that, we sometimes wonder, gee, is anyone else going to help us with this? But the truth is that the more engaged we've been, the easier it's been to ask for help. We've been able to ask for help, and vice versa. That when someone who's come to an AA meeting or come to a neighborhood meeting or a safety gathering or seen us at a block party or something, there's now a familiarity. And there's a greater sense of folks feeling comfortable welcoming us into their lives when they need pastoral care or they need some other kind of support. And we found that, people are, once they've been to a concert or they've been to a couple of other events, it's like, well, what's keeping me from stopping in on a Sunday? I mean, so people feel less anxiety about the physical edifice of a church when they know somebody on the inside, they've hung out with them, they've been able to ask their kind of oddball, sometimes very oddball questions about the church. And, it might seem oddball to me, but it isn't oddball to them. And so there's often a need for a greater sense of vulnerability on both sides. But I think the church being, as you said, available and open, but also someone from the church being present. I mean, it's not just about opening the doors and saying, here's the key, take it over. It's also about being physically present with the neighbors in a variety of contexts and ways, and on a consistent basis. So it's not just like you go to something and then suddenly things change. It takes quite a lot of effort and commitment.
Agreed.
And I also want to affirm the idea of giving back and charity. But what I think we're talking about, it's not about, 10,000 sandwiches last year handed out and the line around the block of people. I mean, that's great that we're feeding people, but the most important thing is the relationship. And I worry sometimes that we can create charities and we can do really good work, but there's a missing role of advocacy and presence that is, in a way, missing part of the function and purpose of the church. So it's not, yes, we want to do this good work, but more importantly, we want to collaborate and encourage change in our communities such that we're building towards that vision of the kingdom of God, the idea of unity, and the idea of abundant life. And if some people are lining up and some people are putting on vestments all the time, and there's not much playfulness between the two, or at least engagement, I worry about that. So I think, yes, do the work of charity. Yes, be engaged in sharing your space. But there's also this really, it's underappreciated, and that is the level of trust and relationality, connectivity, presence that is so important. So I want to encourage people to notice the individuals in line at those bags of beans, notice the particulars, and get to know one another. I think that's really important. If you can get in a relationship of mutuality with folks rather than an idea of us and them, that's really important. And my fellow San Franciscan Sarah Miles has a couple of books that kind of, I think, play with those issues a bit, and would encourage folks to look for her books as well. Miguel and Brendan, should I go ahead and move to the next part of the presentation?
Sure.
Or do we want to keep talking? What's that?
Yes, I think we should go ahead. If you don't mind, I think I'm going to keep the chat box as large as it is right now so that people can see, because we have a really nice conversation going.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to share some examples from St. Cyprian's. And these are not to say, yay, St. Cyprian's, or you have to do everything that we're doing, but to give you some inspiration to say this is sort of how it's worked for us, how you do it, where you do it, it's going to be your own thing. But I'm going to start with St. Francis Day at St. Cyprian's. And obviously St. Francis is the patron saint of San Francisco, so it seems obvious that we would do something. St. Francis, of course, loved animals and the environment, and many congregations invite members to bring their pet to the church for a blessing. For the past 2 years, St. Cyprian's, we've been trying to bring the church to where the pets and people are. This is something that a couple of other churches have done in the city, but the first time we did it, it was more like a small church gathering, almost very insular. We took our service and we did the whole liturgy in the park, and we blessed 1 or 2 pets, and it was fine, but it wasn't what the second year, with the help of students from the university who were working on a project, assisted us in turning it into a public, outwardly facing event. And that allowed us to bless park animals and folks who were coming by on their bicycles. The reason for the cycles blessing, the bicycles blessing, is because of that ecology piece. And in our neighborhood and in our city, cycling is a big deal. And people really loved the idea of having their bikes blessed. And since St. Francis is sort of the patron of ecology, it made sense to do that along with the pets as well. So we had this very outwardly facing event on St. Francis Day, and it was made, more public in the sense of we were more visible and present by signage and real careful, planning by students. And so that also is not the first time that St. Cyprian's has been out there. So we go to block parties whenever there's a block party. It's not like we just did one and that's it. It was a regular, connected presence. People expect us there. In fact, we missed one. We went to one, we went to another one, and someone in the neighborhood was very annoyed. They were like, "Where were you? Why weren't you there?" So there is this kind of regularity now that the neighborhood expects St. Cyprian's to be there, and in fact helps us be there when we're not. In a sense, I would say that this event that we host is only one event. We also do a barbecue. But I think there are examples where you as a congregation member could become part of a neighborhood association or participate in a block party or help with a blood drive or something with another church, but be doing that in a kind of consistent way, not just once and a kind of off chance, but in a regular kind of way. And if there's a way to partner with other groups, it can help kind of bring out, make it even a bigger deal than it might be just as your congregation on its own. And then moving on, engaging neighborhood issues. So the important value of being present, like at block parties, at neighborhood meetings, is that when something really sad happens, you can be present for that. And this is in this set of photographs, there's a sort of array of examples. On the left-hand side at the top, it's basically our neighborhood association that we've become very familiar with and connected with. On the right, next to that, is a photograph of the Village Project, which is an after-school and summer program that a member of our congregation is the executive director of. And we've assisted her in obtaining funds from Episcopal charities and also offer our space to her and her group multiple times during the year and throughout the summer. And the saddest story is that these kids are living in public housing situations where drugs and violence are a real regular part of their lives. And we've been more active now than we've been in a long time about trying to address those issues. And when a shooting happened not long ago, a few blocks away from us, we were engaged with others in the neighborhood in creating a vigil as a response and also connecting with the police and other departments in the city to try to make a difference. There's also traffic calming issues. So the street we're on is very fast-moving traffic, even though we're kind of what would be called, I guess, a residential neighborhood. And we've been working with the Bicycle Coalition and the Neighborhood Association and other groups, City Council, to try to slow the traffic and make people aware of just how dangerous it is. And there was sadly a young man from Germany bicycling right down our street and was hit and killed not long ago. And this was about a year ago or so, and we hosted, along with the neighbors, a vigil in response to that and have spoken in favor of some changes to the city's urban landscape, to try to address those issues. In the center of the photograph is our senior warden, Bruno Pegues, and he's speaking actually about a different event that happened on the same street. And another gentleman was killed walking the street as well. And then to the left is a response that we made to a fire only a few blocks down the hill from where we are. A big fire took out a huge building, apartment building, and we were leaned on by the community, the neighborhood, to host a concert, and we're delighted to be able to partner with them to assist with that. But I really want to say that it was the regular connectivity in the more informal places, like the block parties and the neighborhood meetings, and when we weren't necessarily in crisis mode, that we were invited into the life of people when they were in the midst of crisis. So that I would say is important, because if we're not known, we're not going to be asked to help. And in this way, hopefully, I want to encourage you to do the fun things as well as those things that are more driven by a need to fix a problem or address an issue.
Well, this is Miguel. We just received a question. Will we have gang issues in our neighborhood, and have you had this issue, and if so, what have you done? And I would just also, not to turn that to Will, but also to the rest of the attendees, and if you've had that sort of experience, please respond, because I think it's an important question.
It is, and I am not an expert on that at all, and to be honest, I was really naive about my even sense that was a problem. I mean, I've become aware of that being there these past 3 years. And there are tags that happen on buildings and on walls not far from us and sometimes on our building. There are certain places where young people are not allowed to go, and that's one of the reasons some of these shootings happen, some of the violence happens. I think the important thing is for the church to kind of be transcendent in the sense that we are there to love and care and be present and engaged with everyone as individuals, but also beyond tribe and sort of group, that the church really, if it can hold a more broad and even neutral place, even with city officials and the police, I'm apprehensive sometimes to find myself kind of just being on the side of law enforcement or just being on the side of a particular, you have to be very conscious of how engaged you are with sort of political leaders. I think it's very important that the church have its own kind of voice and place that calls people to kind of reconciliation and sort of truth-telling. And I think that can be very hard, and I think we have a long way to go. But I think there are probably better experts than I. Maybe ECF would be willing to even host a webinar about how churches can effectively deal with gangs and address those issues. But I think to the point, it's really important that we talk to individuals, that we treat individuals like the beloved children of God that they are, and call them into a greater humanity, just like we do with a family or a person who's in an abusive family situation, it's still their family, it's still the people that love them. How do we call them into a deeper relationship with themselves and help them more clearly articulate their desires and hopes for their lives, and not maybe judge them so much so quickly about their affiliations. But that's sort of my naive sense that instead of kind of breaking it down and becoming an expert, I've really found that the way to do things is to be very clearly intentional about seeing the dignity of each person and not trying to judge too much or even, I'm the last person that many people are going to tell me every detail about what's going on with probably the gangs in our neighborhood, but I'm aware that they're there and operating. I think the challenge is, though, to call people into a fuller sense of themselves and a greater sense of responsibility for the whole community and not just their particular tribe or group.
Great. Thank you. So I know that there are additional questions. I think, if I might recommend us moving to the leadership section just because we're about 10 minutes.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to say something about schools for a second because I
Sure.
noticed that Richard described schools as he lives in a student ghetto. I want to say that I think students are amazing and can be incredibly significant in what happens in your church in terms of experiencing vitality and unity. They have a witness to make. They are made in God's image. If there's a way to not see them as just, as I think some communities may, as needy people that aren't quite developed yet or don't know what they're doing or anything like that, I think students, if they feel valued and inspired, they can be very significant parts of what happens in a congregation. And that's been the case at St. Cyprian's with these free community dinners that students are hosting regularly, and then also watching students really come in and become part of our community center and helping run the community center and planning programs. There's a real important role that I think students can play. And the other piece I want to say, too, is that we don't have a, quote, college ministry. In a lot of ways, the college students are ministering to us. And I want to encourage a different way of engaging people rather than sort of suggesting that they need you to do something. They may actually have something for you to receive. Okay, next, leadership. Here we go. So at St. Cyprian's, like many churches, we have in the center our Bishops Committee, or our vestry, and that is, made up of what the diocese requires: baptized communicants in good standing, and we're lucky and blessed by a very good and strong team. Our junior warden, though, is a new member of the church, relatively new. He's been with us the last 2 years or so, and has had leadership in the neighborhood, was the former head of the neighborhood association. So he has been instrumental in helping make sure that our congregation is moving in the direction of neighborhood engagement. Now, it may seem kind of strange that, oh, you let this new guy come in and become a junior warden, but to be honest, our lay leadership, some of whom have been at the church for over 50 years, trust him, like him, and believe it's possible to move forward, despite the fact that he's not somebody everybody's known for a very long time. I want to say that in order for the breadth of what we do to happen, we've had to have two separate kind of, and what I call very important, significant committees. They're not equal in a sense to the Bishops Committee because they have a function that the diocese recognizes, but they have some substantial roles to play, and that's the Cyprian's Advisory Council, which is made up of church members and also Bishops Committee members and non-church people. These are neighbors, they are artists, they are people who have no faith whatsoever in the sense of recognized, organized religion. They may have a lot of faith, but they don't go to church per se. Some have other churches that they attend, some are Buddhists. But we needed that council to really help our church be a local place in the sense that at least the programs we offered through the community center were meeting the needs of the broad constituency around us. And we wouldn't be able to put on the concerts that have upwards of 100 people and other events if it wasn't for people in the neighborhood who said, we care about this and we want to help make this happen. It's been instrumental also in helping us network. So parking at our church was could be considered a challenge, but we were able to partner with the Blood Center, which is down the road and doesn't really use their parking lot at night, and they've been able to be really generous with sharing their parking. But a lot of that kind of networking has really been not just the work of the Bishops Committee and the congregation, but also creating this role for neighbors to have at St. Cyprian's where they can get engaged. And the same is true for the kitchen team, which is made up of, as I said, church members, Bishops Committee members, and institutional partners, so members of the staff at USF, the university nearby, also people involved in the culinary arts, people who have a passion for local food and produce. So each of these different spheres have a kind of significant role to play in the work that we're trying to do. And then at the top, you'll see it says Turk and Lion Summit. And that's something that we think we're going to need to organize. It's messy. It's not neat and tidy. And to be honest, there are times that it's not clear whether an issue should really be addressed by the Bishops Committee, the kitchen team, or the Advisory Council. There's also the question of what do other groups who have a strong role to play but maybe don't, maybe it's the other church that worships in our space. How do they engage? We've invited them to join the Advisory Council of the center, but we've got to make sure that our church and leadership are, connected to their church and leadership. But it's been a much more, I guess, what you would call open classroom kind of model, in the sense that we really are trying to make sure that there's cross-pollination between these different circles and good communication between them, but also real value established that just because you're on the Bishops Committee doesn't mean you get to veto everything that comes to you from these other groups, and vice versa. Just because you want to have this kitchen happen like this, or you want this group to use the space, doesn't mean you can do that without my knowledge or the knowledge of the leadership of the church, the Bishops Committee. So there's a lot of work to still be done. And also, how do we address like long-term needs of the building? I mean, now that it's really a public space, how do we make sure that those needs are met that may be too costly just for the congregation to take care of? So I think now I'm going to, one last thing. Don't underestimate the value of community organizing and the tools that they have relating to one-on-ones and working with other institutions and being able to build a larger voice in your public community. I think that little churches especially could really could benefit from connecting with other groups and other small groups, especially because you can really build a larger organization. And I would remind you that there are networks of community organizers all across the country, from rural to suburban to urban environments, and they have a lot to offer our church. And I particularly have worked with the Industrial Areas Foundation, but there are other networks as well, and many of them are teaching very similar models of neighborhood engagement and building an organization that can address a whole lot of issues that are facing our communities. And our last, one of our participants last week, Jim Sheepers, had some wonderful ideas and some wonderful resources to share, which are uploaded. I think Miguel's just put them up there, so you can download those resources, and they're very, very helpful. And last but not least, don't forget that this is going to be very particular to your context. This is one of my favorite quotes. You know, what we've done in San Francisco is kind of trying to be very present in the heart of San Francisco. They're going to, what happens in your community is going to look very different than probably what we're doing here. But I think there are some tools and skills and some practices that might be very valuable in Abilene as well as in Hamilton and all over the country if we're willing to engage those local communities. And then the last thing is you should expect to be changed and to be surprised. And I think I'm going to stop there. And I'm open. I can stay a little while longer if people want to chat and ask questions. I don't know with you, Miguel and Brendan, where you all are, but I've got
that sounds fine. I'm gonna bring up the download files again. For the Sheepers resources, in order to download them, all you need to do is click on the Sheepers resources, and then once you do, a button shows up download files, and that should allow you to download it. Will, there's a really interesting, I know there's a comment which I think you can speak particularly well to, which is from Myra Sutherland about developing a children's ministry, and I think I know that at St. Cyprian's that's something that you've done quite recently. So.
Yeah, and thank you, Episcopal Church Foundation. We've been able to start a new service. So we, when I started at St. Cyprian's, really had very little in the form of, kids, families, young families, children. The neighborhood around us, though, was very much filled, it felt, at least, at the block parties and things, with young families. And the resources and churches that are reaching those people are very small in terms of those churches that are really providing, exciting activities for kids. And so we began just conversations with parents, and as parents started to sort of gently show up, it became clear that we wanted to be more accommodating than our regular Sunday service could really provide. So we started a new service with the help of a seminarian, and have really, it's basically a very loose interpretation of Rite to Eucharist. We do some godly play, although it's probably a little less tame and contained. We have a musician who's very playful. The whole thing happens in a tent in the community hall in the church. We sit on the floor on cushions. It's almost like romper room meets Montessori, and lots of storytelling. But we couldn't do it if we hadn't really partnered with really new people who were in the neighborhood with kids. And also we hired a person who was local, who had children herself. We invited our administrator who had children to be really part of the work, to sort of forming the nucleus, the beginning of the group. And then one of our newer congregation members with 3 children says, well, we're going to help buy you an ad for the school newspaper and tell people about what's going on. So I think there's sort of a blossoming of that new service, but it really took the beginnings of a team, and it took a relationality between us and people in the neighborhood with children. We had to have a relationship. I think if I had just said we're going to have a kids service and not had any idea who the kids were that were going to come or the parents that were going to bring them, then it was going to fail. But because we really started a team and we really asked what parents wanted, and we had a relationship with them, and we did other programs. We have Parents Night Out, which means parents drop their kids off to USF students who have been trained and know how to work with kids using our facility and so on. So there's been lots of collaboration, but now we're not the church that doesn't have anything for children. We have things for kids, and we have things for parents and so on.
Well, if you don't mind, I think I'd like to move to the next slide just so that people have your contact information.
Oh, sure.
As they head out.
And my glamour shot.
Yes. And for those who are signing off, it would be wonderful if you could also be sure to fill out our survey so that we can continue to improve. I'm putting the survey link in the chat box right now. It's also in the important links area. If you could fill out that survey so that we know how we can continue to improve in the future, and will receive the feedback, and we'll obviously receive the feedback. It's really
and if you
important.
liked it, tell me you liked it. If you didn't like it, tell me. I mean, it's helpful.
Right. Great. Yeah. Wonderful.
Any other questions? Any stories? I do think that, Miguel, the question about gangs is really important. I think it's something that, it would be valuable to, sort of maybe even consider a webinar or even a support group for clergy working in urban environments where they can sort of begin to become more conversant in these matters, because I certainly feel like I have a steep learning curve, and would love to be able to, be a bit more informed and capable of being more of a help.
Yeah, I don't know if you were able to see Anna Olson's comment on this topic. It's in the chat box. She describes as, we're in major gang territory, and kind of gives some insights. But I think that is a really helpful point. Yeah, and obviously a need. So I want to thank everyone for I encourage you to continue to chat, but I want to make sure to also thank everyone for taking some time out of their busy evening and join us. And again, please fill out the survey and contact Will or contact us at ECF to let us know how your thoughts on this topic as well as on the overall webinar. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to actually flip to the next slide